Female entrepreneurs worldwide members, we're having another online session. As you know, we have hashtag Ask You Anything, and these online sessions are to connect our entrepreneurs with industry experts and get mentorship face-to-face online. My name is Yamilette, and I will be your host once again. I'm the founder of Louder. Remember, if you want to ask questions to our speaker, you can tap them in the chat box and I will help you. Or if you're brave enough and you want to have a conversation with Adriana, please raise your hand, wave, make a movement or something so I can let you go on the floor, our online floor, to ask the question. Today we have growth hacks that only an expert marketeer would know. And our expert, as I said, her name is Adriana Lica, who is the founder and advisor at natadi.co. She was also former head of commercialization for PayMe in HSBC, where she oversaw product growth and marketing strategies for the team to make it stronger. And she created milestones for HSBC in Hong Kong. She was previously also working as the digital marketing manager at Swire Properties and head of design at Lowe Profero. She has led digital strategies and APAC-wide marketing campaigns, such as brands with Apple, DFS, KFC, Lexus, and Lufthansa. Adriana is also a mentor for the Credit Suisse Young Founder School, which she aims to educate and connect other group members and inspire them to be founders in Hong Kong. And in her downtime, she is also an entrepreneur who has founded the local e-com flower shop, bloomboxhk.com, and social impact startup, goodwillcollective.com. So remember, if you want to know more about Adriana, connect with her now, or later on, we're going to have our Q&A session after she tells us all her expertise in growth and marketing. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you once again on our online platform, Adriana Lica. How are you, Adriana?
Cool, I'm doing really well. Thank you, Yami. And it's good to be here.
Super. We want to know, how did you start your journey? Like, what drove you to start working in digital marketing?
All right, so I started off my career actually in politics in Beijing. And after 3 months of working in government PR, I realized that it's just a little bit too slow for me. So I applied for an internship at WPP at Ogilvy, where they essentially rotated me around different departments until I was positioned in a creative department where I literally sat on a couch coming up with campaigns for clients. And that was kind of the point at which I realized I love the whole creative process of taking clients' requirements, their goals, their objectives, what they're trying to achieve, and coming up with a cool idea for them. So that's kind of how I started off with advertising, and that transitioned into marketing.
So you studied politics, that's your background.
So I studied economics and politics, and then I went into, it was a government PR company working for the Shanghai Expo in China.
That really shows that entrepreneurs that you don't have to do what you study or whatever your background is. We can always pivot and do something that we really love. Because I know you, Adriana, you really, really love doing your job and creating something new. That's why you're such a great entrepreneur yourself too. And you go from flowers to goodwill and supporting the community. I know that you're also working with another institution called Happier, and you help them launch the H Academy. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually, I'll take a step back. So throughout my career in China, New Zealand, Singapore, and Hong Kong, I've always been teaching marketing, specifically digital marketing. And I first started out teaching in local universities as a visiting lecturer. And then I found in Hong Kong, I found more of a part-time role in the evenings, which allowed me to teach the part-time course digital marketing at General Assembly. And back then, that was kind of the go-to institution to pick up digital skills. Unfortunately, like a lot of startups, they've kind of failed in Hong Kong, and they had to close office. And with them, there all of a sudden there was this gaping hole of where to go for hands-on skills on digital marketing. And that hole remained honestly in the market for about 3 years. So when the founder of Happier came to me, he basically said, look, you've helped General Assembly launch digital marketing. And I believe there's still a need and a demand here in the market. Why don't we do it again? So I said, absolutely. I love teaching personally, and I helped him set up the academy where I teach.
This is not a related question to the topic, but I want to know, how is it, do you prefer to do face-to-face or this, I like to call it now, that's what I mentioned before, our face-to-face online sessions, because we're still looking at our faces, right? But it's not a physical reality, it's the online reality of teaching. Does that make a difference when you are connecting with people and you want to interact and create and build trust?
So actually, really, Yami, that's a really good question, because there was a point at which we needed to make a decision whether or not we do the courses online, obviously due to the current situation, or we go offline. I have a pretty strong stance on teaching offline face-to-face. So I delayed the course until we could actually go offline comfortably when the restrictions allowed us. So for me, nothing beats that face-to-face connection. Nothing beats the classroom where the students can actually work together, especially when you're working on creative, like when you're brainstorming ideas for a marketing campaign. It just cannot be replaced with people jamming together and brainstorming idea and mind mapping cool ideas. So we waited until we could do it offline. So that's still my preference.
That brings me to a next question that it's not on the agenda, by the way, but it's connected to this previous question. You prefer teaching offline because you create the trust and the interaction. What about marketing? Because we are doing a lot of our marketing now online, and a lot of brands or businesses are forgetting about the offline experience. And we had this conversation before with another of our speakers, Celine, and she was saying we need to have like a hybrid on and off, and don't forget about the offline. What is your take about marketing off and online?
So for me as a marketer, I would say that digital marketing is absolutely always first. So it always has been like that for me. So it's kind of PayMe, for example, when we started, it was actually 100% digital marketing. There was no offline element. But at a point when you do become big, I do think that there's enormous value in bringing customers together, especially when you're doing B2B marketing. Unfortunately, I left kind of before we implemented the strategy, but for the B2B side, we essentially came up with a pretty cool hybrid strategy for hosting events. And that was, we were hosting essentially community webinars for our businesses to come together, discuss important topics, upskill each other. And then the offline element was that we were going to send them care packages before they joined an event. So in the care packages, for example, if we were hosting, if the category was F&B community events, then we would send them a little F&B package. If it was like the beauty industry getting together for community events, it would be a little beauty package. So it was our form of hybrid, but I haven't seen yet PayMe executed since I left, which is unfortunate. So yeah, for me, I do agree with, I guess, Celine, is that there's a place for hybrid events in this digital reality.
I remember when I started using PayMe, and I was actually with Belinda, and we were doing this TEDx Tin How recording for the event. And I got how do you call it, those paper clips from PayMe delivered to my home. Is that considered also offline marketing?
That was really interesting. So here's a fun story. That was a massive fail. So those were not paper clips. So every business, if you're registered as a business, we wanted to give you like a little welcome package, right? And that block, that massive plastic block, was actually for you as a business to put it at the storefront or whatever you're doing business, so the customers know that they can pay with PayMe. So you're a PayMe business. But I would say 99% of the businesses that received it thought it's a paperweight.
Yeah. Yeah, I did too. And a lot of the businesses don't even have a physical shop or an office.
And Actually, majority were F&B outlets that were first adopters, and services was actually a really pleasant surprise to me when I started seeing that, oh, wait, I've got accountants using PayMe for Business. That was not expected at all. So I obviously didn't even think that, oh my God, online service providers will be receiving this package. So we pivoted very quickly. And to this day, it was only about 500 people that received it.
That's
yeah,
good.
to answer your question, you're right. It's kind of, what is that something physical? Because yes, I could have sent you a simple welcome to PayMe for Business, but that's not personal enough. You want to feel it. So we try to replicate the Apple experience. When you receive something from the Mac store, it's such a pleasure to open it. Everything feels great. And we wanted all the businesses to feel that. So hence that PayMe for Business welcome package was sent to every business. And honestly, it was quite spendy because the quality was just really good. So it was lovely to see the leadership kind of understand the value in something like that. Yeah.
You said to me you didn't think about that a lot of businesses that provide services were going to start using PayMe at a time. It was more like the industry of F&B. What happens when you create the campaign, then you launch it, and something different happens? Like, how do you make your team pivot? Because also this is a very, very important word to use, pivoting. And what do you do next?
Really good one. I think first of all, I think it starts off with the culture. So for us at PayMe, and in previous jobs as well, this was always something that was really important to me, that it's okay to launch something, and it's okay to launch something and fail, as long as you look at the data really quickly and you come up with, I guess, an optimization plan. So that's always been the culture at PayMe. It's like, just let's see what happens, and we take our learnings and we do something better. So I guess in that particular, the block scenario, again, we gathered the data. Within a week, we started getting feedback, and we iterated super quickly. We're like, okay, drop the block, stop ordering it, design something better for online and offline businesses. So we did that right away. It took us a while to execute, just because the operations are still, they're still quite slow at HSBC for obvious reasons. But in terms of us coming up with new ideas and pivoting really quickly, that was never an issue due to the culture that we implemented. Or fostered is a better word.
Do you have any other experiences like this one with your previous campaigns with Apple or Lexus, Lufthansa? Because they're so different industries. You have airline and a tech company, and you also work with perhaps, with the flowers, for example, when you launched your own business with plants.
They pivoted quickly. I guess not so much pivot, but so Bloombox, I've actually exited and I sold that business a while ago, because I had to make a decision between PayMe and running my own. So I chose PayMe at that point. So Bloombox was really interesting. In our second year, and I had a co-founder at that stage, we obviously we weren't focusing on B2B as an opportunity. At no point whatsoever did we have a marketing campaign for that. But we started, because we got so big on the consumer side, there were companies, so there were consumers working for Deliveroo, for Airbnb, even for WeWork, for really large organizations, Lulu, that started getting in touch with me and asking for workshops for their staff. So all of a sudden, it kind of, I don't know how or why, but it just kind of happened that in one single month, I got like 5 requests for staff engagement activities. And we realized that in that one single month, our sales went like times 300% just because of this opportunity. So we kind of took that right away and we created a marketing campaign the next month. That allowed us to scale massively in that second year, and ultimately for me to be able to sell that business and kind of get a bigger valuation.
Yeah, you're talking about growing, and that takes me to my next question. What do you mean by growth hacks for marketing? Is it only growing teams? Is it growing the amount of presence that you have in the market?
Cool. So growth hacking, I think there's a lot of definitions for growth. And under growth, there's growth marketing, there's growth management, or there's, actually those are the two main ones. So when I say growth hacking, to me, the definition is the intersection of growth marketing, analytics, and product management. So when you're trying, but the entire discipline is all about growing your business, whether that's growing your sales, whether that's growing your customers, whether that's whatever it is that you're trying to grow. But yeah, growth hacking specifically, it's not just marketing. It's those three elements. So for example, a growth hack could be running a small friend get friend campaign, which is a growth marketing. But at the same time, growth hacking could also mean implementing a split bill feature, and then under split bills, making sure that I can invite friends easily via WhatsApp. That could also be a little growth hack to grow my customer base. And then on the analytics side, it's just kind of, it's what enables you to do really good growth marketing and growth hacking. Without having an understanding of how all those three elements operate, you're not truly a growth hacker or growth manager.
Okay. So would you say that that's one of the misconceptions that people have about growth, that it's only marketing related?
Actually, yeah, I would say, yeah, that I'd say that's correct. Also really interesting, in Hong Kong, there's actually an academy that teaches growth marketing. But when I look at their program, it's basically just digital marketing. So it's really interesting, and they're creating this misconception in the market that that's what it is. Whereas if you go to a market in US and you hear a growth manager or growth hacker, it's not a marketer. It's somebody that can do product management, understands how a product is developed, how a feature is developed, has pretty significant understanding of analytics, how to tag a product, for example, again, how to derive that data, analyze that data, but also how to run a marketing campaign. So it's not just marketing.
Oh, that's very useful to have ourselves the proper way to see it. And what about the misconceptions on digital marketing? Because if people are thinking that they're becoming growth hackers by studying digital marketing, then what is it really digital marketing?
Why is it? Sorry, Yami, can you ask me again?
What are the misconceptions that people may have on digital marketing? We already know that they may think that digital marketing is growth. You explained that very clearly. Right. But if I want to go into and embark into the journey of a digital marketeer, what are the things that I must know that this is it and this is not? Okay.
For digital marketing, and actually how I start off my course at H Academy, I describe the differences between growth marketing, digital marketing, and traditional marketing. So digital marketing is a subset of all marketing. It's primarily focusing on digital channels because there's just so many of them that honestly, it's enough of a discipline on its own without you having to learn all of the traditional channels as well. So that's number one. For me, it is a subset of marketing. In terms of growth marketing, the difference, again, this is also just a personal opinion. So there's marketers that will differ on this. Growth marketing will still primarily focus on commercial and sales goals, whereas digital marketing can also focus on brand goals, for example, awareness. Whereas a growth marketer might not necessarily care about brand equity that we're building, or is the NPS score that we're deriving from, I don't know, again, our brand. Mm-hmm. So there is a slight difference in that.
I'm sure our audience, they're very, very knowledgeable, but in the case they don't understand NPS score, other than Net
Promoter Score. So an NPS score can obviously be used in so many places, but for example, a brand might use it in a survey saying, would you recommend us as a brand to your friend? And that's something that a brand marketer or a digital marketer would actually do at some stage when they're trying to, let's say when they're creating a brand awareness campaign, and after the campaign, they would see, have I shifted the sentiment, yes or no? I'll run an NPS survey. Whereas a growth marketer might do an NPS survey, but for a product feature that they've released, for example. Would you use this feature, yes or no? Do you find it valuable, yes or no?
Okay, so less on the experience side of it, and more into the development of the product working itself.
Yeah.
You have worked in so many different type of campaigns with smaller groups and larger groups. What is the difference between growing a marketing campaign with a startup, let's say, and a big corporation like HSBC? Is it the same? Is it different? Is it all data driven?
That's a great question. I think the strategy should always, let's say, the thinking that's applied, or I have to be careful here because I have to be, politically correct. I think as a digital marketer, the campaigns that I've run for HSBC versus, let's say, one of my startups, or even Bloombox, or I have a few right now at the moment just because I run my own advisory. I think the creativity and the strategy that I bring to the table is always the same at the start. But at the end, in terms of execution and the budget, obviously you have to pivot and shift. With somebody large like HSBC, your benefits are the amount of data that you have. It's absolutely astonishing. I can create pretty targeted campaigns in HSBC. Whereas if I'm a startup, it's kind of like throwing a dart into the wind and saying, okay, well, is this going to work or no? So I think, again, in HSBC, the amount of data that I have was absolutely amazing. Obviously, it'll depend whether or not the corporate that you're working on is actually giving you the access to this data. I was lucky enough to have received it. So then most of our campaigns were hyper-personalized and hyper-localized. So I always knew who I'm talking to, what their interests are, and I could tap into those interests as a marketer at HSBC. And obviously the second advantage of launching a campaign in a massive corporate, you have budget.
Yeah.
So absolutely amazing. But versus, of course, in a startup, you got to be super scrappy, and it's very, very unlikely that I'll ever be using any kind of offline tactics because they're just expensive. The negatives, or I guess the differences, are in HSBC, when we launched campaigns, the amount of compliance that was required meant that we're just much slower at execution, and we're much slower at pivoting. So even though we know how to pivot and we're ready to pivot, so for example, I launched the campaign and I all of a sudden realized that services are signing up, but not F&B, F&B outlets are signing up for PayMe for Business. I know what I need to do in order to pivot the campaign and grow the services, let's say, industry. But it just took us much, much longer to do that, simply because of the operational side, the checks and balances that we needed to go through. Whereas in a startup, I can pivot the next day. So I've enjoyed running campaigns for both really large corporates as well as small startups.
Controlling both the balance between budget and how much you can decide, the decision making. You mentioned that sometimes you don't get the data from the big corporates. Why? What's the reason behind that?
I have a really good example. So when I used to work at Swire, so I set up their digital marketing team in Hong Kong and China. And one of the challenges that we had was we wanted to be able to create tailored campaigns for different segments of customers, right? So obviously something like Pacific Place, their customers' behavior is really different. Their interests are obviously much more different than somebody in City Plaza, for example, out in Tung Chung. And I remember very vividly, I wanted to run kind of these loyalty-based campaigns on different customer segments. And all I needed was sales data from the sales team. Mm-hmm. And the initial answer was, sorry, we don't have this because we have to collect the sales data from each individual brand, and that's going to take me 3 months. So they have this data, but they haven't set up, the way this data is delivered to them is super manual. It was literally delivered to them via Excel spreadsheets from each kind of GM of the store, because they didn't have a centralized payment system, and it wasn't digital. It was literally sitting on a super traditional ledger managed by Excel spreadsheets and people submitting Excel spreadsheets. It was insane. So I could never run those really targeted or personalized campaigns at any point when I was at Swire. It was very tough.
Wow, it's interesting to know that that's still happening.
Yeah.
What would you say would be your top hacks to get that competitive edge and gain your consumer trust? Because with digital marketing, I know it's all about ROI. Yeah, you want to get those returns and you have all this data, but you're missing that component of physical interaction. So how can you get that edge? If you were to give us like your top hacks.
Okay, for brand trust, right?
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna start off with one fluffy one. Sorry, wrong word. Okay, I'll give you two tips. Number one is particularly if you're a startup and you're focusing on digital marketing, because, well, one, you should, but two, probably budget. Number one tip is to ensure that your brand is incredibly consistent across all of the comms that you do. So this is probably one of the mistakes that I see a lot of startups do. They don't pay attention to their brand, to their branding. They don't even have a brand Bible. So what this means is that you're starting off on the wrong foot right away with, I guess, your customers. So examples, your fonts on your website will be super different from the fonts in your app to the fonts in your social media. But that already creates distrust, your messy brand. So again, in the digital marketing course that I teach, I actually start off with this. I teach people how to create their brand Bible by themselves, how to even design the elements themselves. But to me, that's kind of one of the foundational aspects of trust, is that your brand is consistent no matter where I go. The way I talk to you is consistent no matter the channel. So that's number one. It's not really a growth hack, but it's, I think, a very important tip. Yeah. And the second one is your trust doesn't necessarily have to come from you as a brand. It's also what your customers say about you. So how do you as a brand incentivize other customers talking well about you, essentially giving you reviews? So this is definitely a little growth hack. Whether you're a website or an app or even a service, you need to I would recommend to run a review campaign. So target customers that have shopped at your, let's say you're an e-commerce store. Target customers that have done at least 3 purchase orders, or whatever you qualify as a happy customer. Even if it's 10 people that have done that, even 10 people, ask them to leave a review on Google. If it's not on Google, whatever your store is most searched for. So for example, maybe, I don't know, all I can think right now is Google, just because that's the most visible place for people to get to kind of view your, whether or not you're a trusted brand. So ask them to leave you a review. So you'd be surprised how incredibly powerful something like that is. And I'll give you an example. When we were in our first year at PayMe, we realized that our review score was super low on the App Store. Not because we had a bad app, that's not it. It's because we realized that when do people leave reviews on the App Store? It's when they are incredibly frustrated with something. So what ended up happening is that only people that were frustrated were leaving us negative reviews, but that's not the full picture. So what we did is we tapped into kind of our happy customer base and was like, could you please leave us a review? And all of a sudden, our score shot through the door and we became the #1 trending app, and we actually got featured in iTunes.
When you have to ask directly, do you have to have someone that is specifically, that has that role to go and ask for good reviews to customers, or it's automated?
So we actually, this was a growth hack, like a true growth hack, because we actually built it into the app itself. So we had a little pop-up screen. So at the end of making a transaction, we decided, well, you're probably a happy customer because you've just had a super good journey. So we surfaced you up with a little, please review us. And so that's a growth hack. Something that simple has helped us basically get into the top trending charts. But you can also run, if you don't have the resources to amend your app or website, you can also run an email marketing campaign easily. Okay. Again, all it takes is 10 happy customers to change the view of 1 negative customer.
Would you recommend then businesses to set up a Google business page? Does that work internationally or even locally?
It still does, especially in Hong Kong. Google search is still one of the primary digital marketing channels when it comes to intent search. So I want to find something, I go to Google to this day. So I would highly recommend that for your kind of to be visible, set up a Google business page. So you need to validate it. They'll send you this little postcard, and you input the code. Like the process is super simple, but I would say yes, for visibility purposes, set that up. And yeah, get some of your friendly, happy customers to leave you a review.
What about the SEO? How important is that? Is that also considered part of digital marketing?
Yes, so anything search related, so search marketing and search engine optimization, so SEO and SEM respectively, is part of the digital marketing agenda. I'd say, obviously, it highly depends on who your customers are, but unless your customers are super millennials who are just living on Instagram, but even they will at some point have to go on Google. So SEO to this day, in Hong Kong particularly, remains one of the most important aspects of growth. So obviously there's ways to kind of make sure that you're trending upwards, when somebody types in a relevant keyword to you. That requires a lot of optimization on your website. But again, small little hacks that can be done to improve your SEO is actually getting a Google business account and listing yourself. That's one of the SEO hacks.
Text-wise, because you're mentioning that we have to be consistent in every channel that we communicate to our customers to build that trust and to be remembered. So if we're writing the text for our websites or even for our social medias, is there any hack there that we can use in order to be at the top of the charts? Or with photos, I've heard that if you decide to put a photo on your website, then you have to have a description and specific words.
So if you asked me this question 4 years ago, I would have said yes. But funny enough, the most important element right now to Google isn't necessarily the keywords. So it's not what you say, it's what your customers say. So the social element basically trumps anything that you do on your website. So again, it's ridiculous, but the reviews are so important. It's just, Google says, oh my gosh, this company has 4.3 reviews, they're important, therefore the rank goes up. So again, reviews are going to be super important. Is the website copy important? Yes, it is, but it's secondary to the social aspect of who you are as a brand or what people say about you. So right now I would say get people to review you. Second, get other websites that have pretty good standing. So again, maybe like your partner websites to talk about you and link to you. So it's called link juice. So that's kind of a second important element that you can do. So it gives you authority on Google, right? So if other people talk about me in a positive way, that gives me brand trust and authority. Therefore, I'm going to rank you up as a company on Google. And only then comes what you say on your website. So yes, you can use the right keywords on your images, on your descriptions, on your titles. But that would kind of be the last thing that, unfortunately.
Wow, that's so cool to know. And what about when people write articles or you're featured in magazines? How does that affect the digital marketing? And because you just mentioned this link use that somebody is perhaps mentioning you, but if they don't link it to their own website, it doesn't really impact? Or how can we leverage when others are talking about us on an article or a feature?
Yeah, so that's called link juice, which is part of this authority ranking that you have. So if somebody writes about you, but they don't link to you, you're not going to get that brownie point from Google.
Okay.
So you need to be able to reach out to your partner and say, hey, can you just link, can you just add my link to this word or whatever. But it definitely helps. So again, first, it's real customers. Second, it's other websites that have good standing and good authority on Google as well. So yeah.
Oh, that's so useful. And when are we talking about in this COVID-19 era that we're still working through innovation and we want to grow and there's so much competition out there? Would you say that innovation is at the forefront of growth?
Interesting. Innovation. I would say creativity is, but it's always been. Right. So let's say before COVID, the space, it's not like it was any harder to market. I still had to compete with exactly the same brands. It hasn't, I think what's happened is that competing offline was incredibly hard. So for example, booking in a billboard in the MTR was actually not that easy. I had to outbid other clients. So the space was super competitive offline. All COVID has done is that people started doing the same thing, but now on Facebook. So now I have to compete with pretty big brands for that space. And yeah, it's becoming much more expensive for me to reach my customers on Facebook. So I'd say the competition was always there. It's just kind of shifted from me competing with these giants offline to now competing with them online. So yes, it's harder, which is why creativity has always been incredibly important. And yeah, I mean.
How can we use then innovation to enhance our creativity? And you also know, for example, if you are a jewelry brand, that they're using all these new tools where you can try the stuff with a virtual setup, perhaps not shoes but even wardrobes. I've seen that they have this technology. Is that enhancing creativity, or is hindering it in a way that the designers are just focusing on data rather than the creativity itself?
I'll be honest. I'm not sure how exactly to answer this question. I don't think innovation can ever hinder your business. Like I can't. It might be just too early to do something. But
it's all about the timing then. Yeah. Not being afraid of innovation, but not rushing into it or leaving it behind.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of examples in my career where innovation was too soon to. I guess, okay, here you go. Here's one. This is still PayMe related. If I think of something else, I will chime in. But we introduced the social aspect of payments. So we wanted to stand out from the crowd, right? So not just from a branding perspective. So when we launched PayMe, it was super fun. We had emojis. Just nothing like any of HSBC marketing has ever done. But the other thing that we've done is we wanted payments to be social. So we wanted to be more than a transaction. Fun fact, we've never used the word transaction in our first year because we wanted to be more human.
Yeah.
But part of this kind of humanizing payments strategy, we also implemented social aspects. So this means that you could see that your friend has, paid Yami for lunch. Yeah, so we introduced this. For us, this was definitely innovation. So it was too soon for Hong Kong. Especially where privacy, like everybody here, again, something that we learned, privacy it's not that it was less private, like it's just a lunch and you don't see a transaction and you still have a choice to hide that payment, but it just became this massive point of discussion where PayMe doesn't care about privacy. But it wasn't that, it was just people here weren't ready for something like this, and I don't know if they will.
True. Yeah, I remember thinking, why do I have to know all these things?
that are bad.
That's good to know. It came from a different light because, yeah, it's difficult to understand if we don't have the person or the actual meaning behind it, the intention behind specific things. Digital marketing, I go back to the same thing about being data driven, and you pinpoint privacy. What to do as a digital marketeer to not cross that line or not to make your customers feel that their privacy has been breached?
Number one, do you know what? I've got so many tips on here actually, but I think the overarching theme is that if you're collecting data, you obviously have to always just be transparent about it, obviously. So for example, if you're planning to use your customers' data to run ads, right? Just say so. Just say in the beginning, look, we'll be advertising to you, and if at any point you don't like these ads, you can hide them. The choice is yours. But if you'd like to see awesome offers, then please say yes. I see a lot of, again, over the years in some of the companies and some of the clients that I've worked with, I've seen some shady practices. So here's two to please avoid. Number one, in all of the email marketing, they try to, the unsubscribe, which is mandatory.
Okay.
They try to either make it the same color as the background, so you can't actually see it or find it, but then somebody like MailChimp, they would have picked up that you have it, but they wouldn't know that you're hiding it because the colors are the same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was shady practice number one, which obviously creates massive distrust from customers. You're trying to like take my choice away. Like, that's crazy. So please don't make it hard for customers to unsubscribe. I see brands do this in Hong Kong and I shudder at the thought of it, because you wouldn't like this as a customer, so don't do it to yours. Then number two, again, when I register for an app, I see a lot of apps are trying to pre-tick the terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. As a way to, you know what they're trying to do, right? It's like you're removing their choice, or you're moving them from thinking whether or not to accept it or not by pre-ticking it. I'd say that's kind of, yeah, I think that's not the most sincere way of doing it, because you're doing it knowing that you're trying to get people to submit, like give you their access to data. So don't pre-tick it. Like, leave the customer to decide whether or not they want to give you their data.
Analytics, and I know there's so many things you can tell us, and I would like to ask you for our last question, if you can think about it now. Don't answer, please. If you're going to leave us with something, what would that be, your last piece of advice? But before that, I would like to know, you teach young entrepreneurs or people that are still in college that they want to start a business or find a job, but you also teach people that already have their businesses and perhaps they have failed or they have succeeded. Do you do it differently when you're teaching them these hacks, or it's exactly the same message for all of us?
It's a great question. Actually, so I teach in a number of places, and the students differ by the life stage of their business and their idea quite a lot. So what I teach will primarily change based on where they are with their business. The type of marketing that I will teach a startup that doesn't even have a brand will be a little bit different from what I will teach a startup that's in their growth phase. And also it'll highly differ. I'll personalize it based on their business life cycle, and based also on the country. So I actually have a few startups that I mentor in Russia. Very different. Very different in terms of the marketing channels that I teach. Very different in terms of the messaging that we work on. So it's always personalized.
So then would you say that it's best for us as entrepreneurs or anybody that wants to grow their business and services to really think that if my friends they're telling me that they're doing this and that, doesn't mean that it's going to work for me. We really have to tailor it and have the objective very clear where we want to go.
I would say, Yami, you're absolutely correct. You have to tailor it to your customers, where they are, who they are. But obviously there's uniting elements no matter what kind of business you are. And the uniting elements, I guess, there's a digital strategy framework that can be applied to absolutely anybody, and that's consistent. And also, so for example, as part of the digital marketing strategy framework, for example, there's a 6-step process that I teach. One of these steps is you always have to optimize. So before you decide to cancel a campaign, you have to optimize and test. So that's something that no matter who you are, in what country, what life stage you're at, you can do this. So I guess that's one consistent element. So maybe I guess my tip would be learn, I guess if you're a startup or a large business, learn the basics of a marketing strategy. So we call it a strategy framework. And then tailor the little bits underneath. So for example, the channels, the messaging, the way you're going to optimize something to who you are as a business and to your customers.
What's your last piece of advice, Adriana? I love the one that you told us about being consistent. Why? Because this actually, and I'm going to repeat myself, has been a consistent theme over the past weeks where we have other wonderful speakers. They all say it doesn't matter the industry, that we do have to be consistent with our messaging, whether it is for a brand or a personal branding. And I also believe in that. but what would be your last piece of advice to our audience?
Okay. My last piece of advice would be to, as a marketer, one of the most important things is to stay constantly curious. I would say start off your day by looking at some amazing new products that are launching or amazing new campaigns from all over the world and learn something new. I've recently if I have like one more second. So to give you an example, so one of my startups is in Nigeria. And I started reading, I started basically following kind of marketing agencies in Nigeria to see what's trending. And there was this little thing, like a little campaign that came out, and it essentially was, so somebody put on the cars in Legos this little sticker with a card inside, and the sticker said, "I'm so sorry about your car." And then when they open it, it's an ad. She was like, but I think like that's smart. Like, that's gonna make me look, but also like obviously first thought is I'm gonna worry about my car, but I'm gonna open it. It's like, oh, it's an insurance service with like 50% off.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it doesn't cost that much to do that. I could do that anywhere. Anyway, just stay curious and just read as much as possible.
Be creative, and learn and develop yourself. That's why we have these wonderful online sessions. And I love because every time I do learn something different. I like that campaign. I might take it myself. I'm sorry it took your voice. You're like, what?
I'm sorry about your brand image. Yeah, I help you.
Correct. If we have here on the floor, obviously our few members and the team, Mia, she's there, Ellen, I can see Stephanie, hello. We have Kelsey, Kat, Ines, co-founder of Female Entrepreneurs Worldwide. She is also connecting with us. Ada, if anybody has any questions to Adriana, Junie Lai. Oh, I have one here from Stephanie. Hi, Adriana. Thanks so much for the talk. I have a couple of questions. First, okay, let's go one by one, Adriana. What is your opinion on digital marketing for professional services, like risk advisory services, for example? First question.
Oh, I love this. So this reminds me of going back to Swire, obviously like a massive property giant. They've never done digital marketing before, and convincing them was my task. So before getting the job, I actually had to pitch for it. My advice is, first of all, every company needs to understand the value of digital marketing. Obviously, not every company will. For advisory services, professionals. Okay, I assume it'd be still important for, actually, Stephanie, do you mind if I ask you a question back? For this particular company, do they do any kind of marketing at all?
Let's see, Stephanie, are you shy, Stephanie? Or type it here. Hi, there she is.
Hey, thank you, Adriana. Really, really good talk, and thank you for answering my question. So we do digital marketing, but it's all organic. And then we do a lot of direct marketing as well, like emails and things to our clients and things. But I am trying to convince them to do something a little bit more out there, and I'm really just trying to get a case together for us to do some paid media.
Awesome. So what I would then suggest I would suggest a test and learn for them. So the next campaign that's coming up, so let's say if you're using direct marketing to achieve a certain goal, I would tell them, how about on the side I do one small simple test and just I will use a social media ad to see whether or not I could achieve the same or close result and how much it will cost. I would pitch it as a test and learn and test with a very small budget. I'd actually...
Out of curiosity, what is small to you? So like, for example, like $1,000 US, would that be worthwhile?
Actually, I would do it even smaller.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Actually, do you know what? Here's my email. And we can even we can chat after this, but I can like super happy to maybe like help you craft this. But I would even start off with even 100 US for a super targeted ad on Facebook, just to show them how little it costs to get the attention of let's say GMs or C-suites or whatever. Like all it takes is 100 US bucks to get some interest, even if it's from, again, like if, I assume you're doing B2B marketing, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So to give you an example, I actually did this for one of the clients on Hula, which is like a buy now, pay later platform. They've never used B2B lead generation ads of any sort. They've always done cold calling. So what I've done is I basically got the cost of like the cost of cold calling, which is a person. And I said, look, for half of that, I can get you exactly the same amount of leads that are going to be high quality. And we tested it out and it worked like magic. All it took was literally 100 US bucks.
Okay, amazing. All right, yeah, that's really good. Thank you. I'll definitely try that.
Try if you're doing a lead generation campaign, I'd highly suggest Facebook lead ads. They're a new type of ad which works like magic, and honestly not enough services in Hong Kong use it, so it's still a very uncrowded space. And then LinkedIn ads.
Then LinkedIn.
Yeah,
okay,
LinkedIn is just a bit more expensive, but Facebook ads are honestly like they're still so cheap, and we're all on Facebook, right? So like all the GMs are on Facebook, so it's, you know, they spend their time on there more than they do on LinkedIn, so it's an awesome channel for even B2B marketing.
Okay, great. That's really good insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And that actually linked to her second question, which was how to convince them to start using paid ads for social media. Make sure to connect more with Adriana because she can help you craft that message even more. Do we have any? I'm going to check this chat. Other questions from our attendees? Not at the moment, but I really want to also thank Kate. She's here. Crystal Lee. We have Tina Wong. She's also connecting. Thank you very much for being here with us. And indeed, Adriana, very insightful experiences that you have had, and then you're giving us all these pointers that, as I said myself, I'm also going to reach out to you further on Saturday. I see you. If there's anything else you want to tell our audience, if not, please remember that we do have these online mentoring sessions every week, and you can learn from different experts in different industries and topics. So make sure to hashtag ask Few anything, and they will answer. Reach to the Few team throughout the website, social media, LinkedIn, all of the platforms available, the WhatsApp. We also have a WhatsApp and email. I'll see you soon in a couple of weeks. And thank you once again for having me. My name is Yamilette. Thank you, Adriana, for connecting with us on our online space.